Welcome again, Classless Tech. This is a video on advanced digital forensic, and then my area of focus is email forensic. Going more into email forensic and what email forensic is all about. This channel goes by the name Classless Techie that provides you with all around 360 knowledge or videos about anything related to technology, not in any specific area. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, and then you share. The protection and then security of email is a challenging proposition where email security is susceptible to both active and passive forms of attack. And then also, many of these attacks are possible because Simple Mail Transfer Protocol (SMTP), the most popular mail protocol for exchange of email, do not have privacy and then security features. So most of these phishing and then social engineering attacks do happen through emails. So it's likely you have an email and then it's having an embedded malware or spyware or any payload within. So what is memory forensic? Memory forensic is an emerging sub-branch of digital forensic that extracts data of volatile memory of the infected device for analysis. So one may ask, what is digital forensic? Digital forensic is about capturing or investigating into a case that involves digital materials or digital data, and then you are retrieving those digital data to prove or to back a legal battle or to support any kind of lawsuit. Sorry. So memory forensic is a branch in digital forensic that deals with analyzing memory of a device. And then in this case, we are making reference to it as a volatile memory because the memory is volatile, and then whenever there's power outage or the device is off, the data may be lost. So you need to capture the memory while the data is on at the spot. So that is the surface of memory forensic. So with that, we'll be doing the memory forensic and then analyzing the email. So focusing on the email forensic. Email forensic is the analysis of email and their content to determine the legitimacy, source, date, time, the actual sender, the recipients in a forensically sound manner. So you have an email and then you are analyzing the email to identify the legitimacy, the authenticity, the source, the date and time, the actual sender, and then the recipient in a forensically sound manner. Email forensic is used to guarantee non-repudiation. So in a case that something will happen and then you are trying to investigate, and then the one that sent the message is trying to deny the fact that the email is actually from him, or the person is trying to deny the source of the email. Through the email forensic, you'll be able to identify the legitimacy, the authenticity, the source, the date, time, the actual sender of the email, and then you'll be able to prove if that email is actually from the person that you claim or the suspect. Email spoofing attack. Email spoofing refers to creating of forged email that appears to come from an authentic source. The email is forged, but in the face or in the surface of a mere user or a layman user, that a friend of mine, Musa, might say, a layman user, sorry, a layman user's view, the spoofed email might seem or look authentic. So email spoofing refers to creating a forged email that appears to come from an authentic source. As the core email protocol (SMTP) does not provide any authentication mechanism, emails are vulnerable to spoofing and phishing, while the email header is forged to mislead the user. Thus, the email header is vital for the identification of spoofed email attacks, as the header information of genuine and the spoofed email is different. Whenever you analyze the header information of a genuine and then a spoof email, you identify that there will be some differences in the from field of it and then the message ID field of it. We'll be looking at the various fields you have in an email header. So spoofed email detection by analyzing email headers is a challenging problem in email forensic investigation. And then today we'll be looking at it and then we'll be solving that particular problem. So advantages of capturing live processes, memory forensics. The advantages of capturing the live data in the memory forensic. In memory forensics, memory dump of the client is acquired to analyze and identify spoofed emails. So you are trying to identify spoofed email using email forensic, and through that you have to capture the data through memory forensic. The advantage of memory forensic application for spoofed email detection is that we get guaranteed non-repudiation of the user's digital footprint in physical memory. Guaranteed non-repudiation. So through that you detect and then the person may not have more proof to deny the source of the email. Contribution of this particular lecture to outline an email forensic based spoofed email detection. We are trying to detect a spoofed email through the email forensic process. Detection algorithm is modified to address the failure of message ID based approach in specific cases, which results in rise of false positives by adding MX record based matching to increase the accuracy of the spoofed email detection process. In this particular lecture, I'll be looking at two procedures or two methods or ways of identifying if an email is a spoofed email or not, which includes the message ID detection method and then the MX, which stands for message exchange record matching method. So looking at this basic block diagram representing steps of program execution. So we are having some 6 steps we will use to get to detect if an email is spoofed or genuine. So let's say you send an email to somebody and then the person opened the email over here at the point 1 or the first step. You capture the browser processes or the store processes of the browser. So whenever you want to capture only the browser processes, you have some tools that you can use. To capture only the browser process, you can use magnet process caption tool. So with that magnet process caption tool, you can be able to capture the processes of the browser you are using. In that case, you are focusing on browser-based web applications or web servers, email servers. And then if you want to capture the entire memory, you can use a software like FTK Imager. It gives you the possibility or the capability to capture the entire memory. So when you capture the memory, without analyzing or extracting it, it's not readable. So you have to extract the strings. In that case, you can use a software like Autopsy to extract it so that you can have access to the email headers. Then you filter the email headers. So in filtering the email headers, you'll be able to have the various fields within the email headers. The from, where the message is coming from, the to, where the message is going, the message ID field, which is generated by the mail, the client you use or email service provider you use, and then you have the subject of the email. So you filter those particular fields within the header, and then you do the spoof detection. You run the algorithm which is comparing the field of the from and then the field of the domain, the message ID, and then you compare the domain of the field of the from and then the field of the message ID, and then you detect the email as spoof, and then you store it in the last step, which is the step 6. So any spoofing attack detection in email is based on the analysis of the email header. So these are some of the fields we have in the email header. You have the from, and then it's email message sender's details, where the email is coming from, the details of the sender. And then you have the to, the first or the main recipient of the message. And then we have the subject, which is the title of the email, the content, the actual content of the email, or let's say the subject of the. We have the message ID, and it is the unique reference to email message created by the mail server of originating email. It's very unique, so it's not possible you have two different mails having same ID. That is what we are saying. It's unique reference to the email messages, and it's generated by the mail server of the originating email. So it is possible that the domain of the from field can be forged. So this is a sample of the individual fields we have within the header. So you have within the original message, you have the message ID, and then this is the unique identification given. And then you have the domain name over here, gmail.com. And then you have the date, the time of creation, the from, where the message is coming from, the to, who is receiving the message. So in using the email forensic, the message ID detection method, you compare the field of this message ID, the domain, to the domain of the from, where the message is coming from. So in a case that you have the domain to be the same, the domain of the message ID and the domain of the from field to be the same, you can conclude that the email is genuine. But it's possible you have differences in the domain of the message ID and then the from ID. But from there, you can't conclude that that is a spoofed, because whenever you have differences, it may be that an organization that hire or outsource their email services to email service providers may fail in the message ID matching. So in a case that the organization outsourced their email services to email service providers, when you use the message ID matching method, you realize that the domain of the message ID will be different from the domain of the from field. For example, G Suite, if an organization switches over to G Suite by Google, its email will still remain the domain of its parent organization, but the message ID, which is generated by the sending email server, here Gmail will have Google domain. So the organization is outsourcing its email service to an email service provider, and then that organization is sending an email. You realize that the message ID will be having the domain of the outsourced email service provider, and then the domain of the from field will be having the domain of the parent organization. So looking at the detection algorithm, this is a sample of the from field. And then this is the domain of the front field. You can realize that the domain over here, royalty plus dot arrow, and then the domain of the message ID, which is generated by the email service provider or the mail client used in sending the message. You have loyalty plus arrow. So you can realize that the domain is the same over here. So this particular header, you can conclude that the message is genuine. So let's look at some experimental setup. So these are some of the websites you can use to send a spoofed email or anonymous email. So let's say we use any of this to send a spoof email, and then we use a genuine email service provider or mail clients like Google, Outlook, Yahoo to send a genuine message. And then we try to analyze the various fields. So when you look at this particular one, so this is an interface of a website that you can use to send a spoof email, spoof my email. So over here you can forge the domain of the sender, and then it will look like a very authentic email. So whenever you, let's say, spoof my email, and then you come to spoof email over here, and you'll be able to fake that message or that email and then send it to your target. So let's go into more practical aspect of how to achieve all this that I have spoken about. So we are having an email over here from a Gmail. So let's say I'm in my inbox and then I receive this particular message. And then I want to verify if it is a spoofed email or a genuine email. I have to open the particular message, and then having these three dots over here, I will expand it, and then I will come back to show original. I will click on the show original. So when you go to the show original and then you have the original message, you have this particular fields within the header. You have the message ID that is generated by the mail server, and then you have the domain mail.gmail.com, and then you have the the time created, the date, and then just that. And then you have the from where the message is coming from, the domain of the where the message is coming from, and then you have it to be gmail.com. And then who is receiving the message, the recipient at gmail.com, the subject of it, the SPF, the service policy framework, the DKIM is passing with the domain gmail.com, and then DMARC is also passing. Okay, so that means it's identifying it as genuine or authentic. But looking at analyzing the two fields, the message ID and then the from field, you realize there's a slight difference over here. The mail.gmail.com, and then this one is only gmail.com. From the expert view, I know and then I can conclude that this is a genuine email. But looking at layman's view or somebody who is not having a knowledge, a tech knowledge, let's go to the second method, that is message exchange matching method. So we use that method whenever you see or there's a difference between the domain of the message ID and the domain of the from field. So over here you are having the header, and then you can download the original header. It's advisable you download the header and then you open it in a text editor, and then from there you copy and then you paste it in the message mail exchange analyzing tool. Most of them, you have them online. You can use email tracer, message header analyzer, MX toolbox, and then IP2 location. You can use those ones to trace and then to confirm the originality of the domain you are having. So you can come to the copy to clipboard, and then you copy the header, and then you can come to the MS toolbox, and then you have paste header. So you paste your header, the header you copied, you can paste it here, and then you analyze header. So you can realize that from the message header first, you are having the SFP to be passed, the DKIM to be passed, and the DMARC to be passed. And this is the IP address of the email server. You can track this particular IP address. One particular website, whois.com. You can use whois.com to track this particular IP address to know the source or where it's coming from. So let's verify this header within the MX toolbox. So we are trying to verify the DMACL, the SPF, the DKIM. So let's go down here and then you look at the analysis. So you realize that the DMARC is passed. That is why it is shown in green. And then you have the SPF also passed, shown in green. You have the DKIM also passed, shown in green. So let's look at analysis of the particular individual headers. When you look at the authentication result, this is the domain in google.com. And then you are having a DKIM pass within the header. When you move on to the SPF, it's also pass. And then you move on to the third one, which is the DMARC. It's also pass. So you realize the header is from gmail.com and it's authentic. So this is the authentication result over here. So you're having all those three features being passed. So from here you can conclude that the message is a genuine message and then it's not a spoofed email. You can go ahead and then you test the same header in using the website email tracer or IP2 location to track the source of the server. So these are some of the references you can use to read more about this particular topic, and then you have interest in doing more in email forensic and then memory forensic.